I understand you guys do heavy automation, but there's still people in working in these buildings.
Yeah.
It's how's their way of life at work? How comfortable are they in the warehouses? Even something as little as you take, again, a warehouse that's air conditioned and one that's not. Well, which one do you think is going to have the retention of employees that's going to be much higher? It's the one that's comfortable working in the environment versus the one that at 2 o'clock you're covered in dust and sweat and you're super hot. And then the production and just your operation slows down just because they're not as comfortable.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of our podcast, The Automation Journey. I'm your host, Marissa Dierlam, Head of Marketing for TGW in North America. Today, we'll be diving into the topic of green initiatives, covering the sustainability of greenfields and brownfields, energy-efficient daily operations, and more. If you're watching on the video, you can see there's a special guest behind me. We have Adekambi Laleye from Rosefellow joining us, and also in the studio today is Dexter Weber to share his opinions on the topic. Thank you both for joining. Before we dive into things, do you mind introducing yourselves?
I'm Dexter Weber, Business Development Manager here at TGW. And I focus on helping companies with their warehouse automation solutions.
Pleasure. Thank you guys for having me on the podcast. My full name's Adekambi Laleye. Everyone calls me Kambi. I'm Director of Business Development and Leasing at Rosefellow.
Awesome. So to start our conversation, I think it would be interesting to know what you guys are hearing about ESG goals and any pressure that people are feeling these days from sustainability, green initiative regulations. ESG, of course, standing for environmental, social, and governance goals. So Dex, how much does the topic of sustainability or meeting ESG goals come up in your conversations with customers these days? And are you seeing any trends?
I would say it's a growing trend, definitely. Whether it's maybe more in the RFP process or maybe just questions throughout the beginning of the journey we experience with our customers. I think they're looking at topics like how can we look at our packaging, maybe get rid of some of the plastics? What can we do for energy efficiency with this technology? So there's a lot of investigation into it, and coming from a former industry, so in the technology and furniture sector, this was a big topic. So I would say it's not necessarily a new trend, but it's definitely reaching different markets. So especially with office furniture, you had a lot of standards that customers would have, and they would go beyond regulations. They'd really focus on going a step above and beyond. So it kind of just leads to other industries. And I think another driver behind all of these definitely comes from modern day buyers, right? Mm-hmm. So you have a lot more focus on sustainability efforts and how your company's making a positive or better choices when it comes to impacting the environment.
Very good. Kambi, I know at Rosefellow you guys pride yourselves on your Class A LEED certified warehouses. When you're talking to potential tenants, do they understand the idea of LEED certification right away, and is that attractive to them?
Not always, but it's definitely something when you kind of talk about it high level. The main points are always the air-conditioned warehouse, the energy-efficient lighting, the additional windows in the warehouse that brings in natural light that plays such an important role for their employees, that once you start talking about those high-level points, then the light bulb goes off, pun intended. It's just really one of those things that allows them to better understand, these are the simple things that actually make it more comfortable for our employees, but these are also the things that helps us save costs. So once you start talking about those high-level points, it really allows them to want to dig a little bit deeper into the topic.
And do you see changes in demand for LEED? Is that like a growing request?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things that when I'm talking to brokers and end tenants, it's one of those things that it is absolutely growing. When you're comparing, I would say, a LEED or zero carbon building to a building that's just built today, or even a building that's built 10 years ago, when you just look at the energy efficient savings, when you look at a building that's built 10 years ago and maybe you're paying around $1.50 per square foot for energy, then you compare it to a building that's built today and you're paying about, call it 60 cents per square foot for energy, but then you're looking at an energy efficient building and you're paying less than 40 cents, that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I know Rosefellow, you guys are mostly operating in Canada, but are exploring things in the U.S. Dex, you have more of the U.S. perspective. I'd be curious to hear from both of you. Do you think the U.S. is currently slower to adopt green initiatives? And if so, do you see that changing anytime soon?
Yeah, I'll dive into that. I would say it's still a slow and steady growth here in Canada, and the US was probably a little bit behind us at the moment. It's not necessarily something that when a tenant comes to the table that they're necessarily looking for, but once you start, again, diving a little bit deeper, they realize the positives that a carbon zero LEED certified building brings. And again, it's that educational component behind it of allowing people to understand that these are the key points, this is the difference. I would say today we're not able to charge additional rent on a building that's zero carbon or LEED certified. But what it allows us to do is for us as developers to future-proof our buildings. But as a tenant, it just allows them just the comforts of that building, the energy savings again that I mentioned, which is eventually going to trickle down, right? So the more that people realize, wait, there's dollars to be saved in a building like this, the greater it's going to continue to expand.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree too. I think it might also depend on like industry or region within the U.S., right? So certain states might have more strict regulations or just, behavioral patterns with the people that live there where they might have more focus on certain aspects to it. Definitely when we look ahead to our counterparts over in Europe as well, I think we're definitely behind here in the U.S., but I think Canby touched on it quite nicely. Like when it comes down to a cost savings, that's generally where you get more interest in it. So I think part of the sustainability piece is often around how can we not only make it like a better, more conscious choice, but how can it lead to cost savings? And I think if you look at some of the leaders in the automotive space, for example, or I referenced like office furniture earlier, there's a lot of focus on how can the sustainability help us cut costs in addition to what we're doing? And that's where you see, I think, a little bit more of a drive. But
it's kind of shifting the conversation from something that's feel good to possibly a competitive advantage.
Exactly. Yeah.
So let's talk more about warehouse buildings themselves, because I think there are a lot of tangible ways to take on green initiatives just through the building. So let's start with maybe a hot take question for you guys. Are Greenfield buildings the best way to ensure a warehouse hits its ESG goals?
I'll say absolutely. Obviously, being spec developers primarily, that's what we do. So I would say there's definitely an advantage of building from Greenfield and kind of starting from the ground up versus taking a brownfield and having to do a larger refresh, I guess you could say. But there are benefits for sure, and I think as we run out of space, especially here in Montreal, when you look at the island of Montreal, you look around, you see all this green space, but that's all protected. It's forest, it's wetlands, it's protected space. So eventually, yes, we will have to look back at those older buildings and see how can we optimize those and bring them to today's standards.
Sure.
And that's something that we are extremely looking close into. But at the moment right now, it's Greenfield over brownfield for Rosefellow.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I would say kind of a different answer, but maybe just more that it depends, right? So I think the great thing about doing a Greenfield site is you can have a modern building with maybe more modern materials, modern heating and cooling solutions, better insulation, better windows, the LED light bulbs, things that automatically shut off, right? There's a lot you can do there in designing a space. On the flip side, with the brownfield, the space might already exist, so you're not impacting the carbon footprint by building a new building.
Sure.
But it really depends on the level of customization you need to make, the level of construction that you need to do. What are the existing materials in there? How safe are they? And then how much do you need to scrap? So it can be very situational. And then I think if you look at a lot of the Greenfield sites, like when Rosefellow puts some together, the warehouse is already built. So if you're thinking about your long-term goals and you're looking at an existing site that's kind of a blank slate with high energy efficiency, or an older building that you're going to have to do a lot of work on, I mean, the choice is pretty clear to me. Like, the green space makes a lot more sense. The Greenfield site and that scenario makes more sense to me. But it's just really situational, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Dex, you're touching on it a little bit, but I'd like to hear more. What are some of the really practical ways that you can make a brownfield a little bit more sustainable, besides just adding something like solar panels?
Yeah, I think it comes into like racking and equipment design, right? Where are you sourcing these? Is it a lower carbon footprint for the steel that you're putting in the building? We already both kind of touched on it, but energy efficiency or energy efficient lighting, and then does it automatically turn on and off when there's movement instead of keeping it on all day?
Sure.
Heating and cooling. Can you get a more modern system? Can you improve your insulation in the building? Maybe you're electrifying some of the equipment in the building. So there's a lot of different aspects you can do there, and then it's also what materials are you using? What are your recycling programs for a lot of the scrap or waste that you're using within the building? And then if you're doing an expansion or more construction, the types of materials you use in there. If you're putting in automation, getting something that's a little bit more energy efficient, maybe less of battery power sometimes in that scenario where you might have more conflict minerals or like rare earth mineral mining that goes into some of those things. So the type of technology you put in there might be a little different on how it impacts the environmental aspect as well.
Yeah. Camby, at Rosefellow, why is it so important to you guys that your buildings are Class A and LEED certified? Why is that something that you really push on and are prideful about?
Yeah, that's something that when the founders really looked at the future of development, they wanted to future-proof their projects. What we're in the process of doing right now is building Canada's largest green industrial portfolio for us, which means, again, zero carbon, LEED certified. A lot of the buildings that we are doing are LEED Gold, which is really taking it another level. And it's to future-proof. Again, if you're going to build a portfolio of buildings and hold that for the next 5-10 years, when an investor is going to come and want to purchase these buildings, and again, you have one portfolio, let's just say, of 10 buildings that aren't zero carbon and LEED certified, and you have another portfolio that is, which one are they going to select? Because again, when you look at maybe 5, 10, 15 years from now, maybe governments are really going to start to tax businesses that aren't meeting those ESG initiatives, right? And that are producing additional carbon into the environment. So you're going to want to protect yourselves in that sense. And again, just the building carbon zero and LEED certified, it just brings so much additional benefits for the tenant. So again, in the future, 5, 10 years from now, when the tenant comes to select 2 buildings and they're really looking at each line item from a cost standpoint, which one are they going to want to select? And that's just from an Excel spreadsheet. But I touched on it a little bit more, is again, it's the human aspect of it. When humans are in the building, even if it's, I understand you guys do heavy automation, but there's still people in working in these buildings.
Yeah.
It's how's their way of life at work? How comfortable are they in the warehouses? Even something as little as you take, again, a warehouse that's air conditioned and one that's not. Well, which one do you think is going to have the retention of employees that's going to be much higher? It's the one that's comfortable working in the environment versus the one that at 2 o'clock you're covered in dust and sweat and you're super hot. And then the production and just your operation slows down just because they're not as comfortable. So again, when you look at all these different factors, that's a main reason of why Rosefellow is building this green portfolio of buildings.
Yeah, very cool. And what all goes into LEED certification? Is it just about the materials you're using, efficient or modern heating and cooling, smart building technologies? What all goes into that?
Yeah, there's a lot of different points that goes into building a green building. Everything from glazing to the roof materials to the dock doors to the walls that you use, the type of heating, of course, the type of lighting, the amount of windows and natural light that allows into a warehouse. But it goes even a step further. Rain collection, the heat effect on concrete of reducing concrete outside and having more grass. We touched on it, solar panels is something as much as having solar panels on your building to capture that natural resource. How close are you to transport stations in terms of bus terminals and train terminals or bike stations that people can easily and more efficiently get to work without having to take their car to reduce the pollution on that sense. So there's a lot of points that when looking into, again, carbon zero in the LEED building, that goes into it. That's much more than just putting a couple solar panels on the roof, right?
Yeah, that's very cool. I hadn't thought about all the different aspects, even like the transportation for employees. That's very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm seeing a lot of natural overlap between our companies. You've used the term future-proof a couple times. That's one that we tend to use a lot with our customers too, talking about how does automation and the way we tailor our systems make them operationally flexible for future. So let's talk about maybe some other natural overlaps too. Dex, what's nice about Class A building specs for our customers, and how does that impact our ability to implement warehouse automation?
Yeah, that's a good question. So already just thinking about the impact of people is just a great one for it. But I think when we look at the building, the Class A buildings tend to be a little bit taller. So when you're installing automation equipment, especially automated storage and retrieval systems like shuttles or mini loads, some sort of crane system, whatever that looks like, you can get a lot more utilization vertically. So you're using the space better, a lot more density in that regard. So that's like a really big aspect to it when it comes down to like storage performance and density requirements. Also, the quality of the slab material tends to be really good, which is really important for setting up some of those systems. Certain ASRS systems have much more difficult requirements than others. So depending on the type of technology you're installing, it's really important to have that good slab quality. Same goes for mobile robotics. If you have a lot of like cracks, divots, or uneven flooring, it might change which options you have or what kind of processes you can automate. So I think the quality of the buildings there, that's also another important aspect to it. And then I think it's kind of often a clean slate for design. So you can really put together a well-intentioned automated system, whereas you look at maybe an existing brownfield site and it might have some weird locations where beams are placed or walls that are inconvenient and structural parts. And so you kind of have to work around it. Whereas it's more of a nice blank slate that allows you to design a better, more efficient from not just like the energy perspective, but the material flow around the building. So there's a lot of benefits to that kind of aspect to it. And then as I kind of started off with, we often look at automation, how it improves the workers' lives. And so I think, just being in a good building, good environment that's clean, that excites you, that's maybe not such heavy lifting, and then all that natural light that comes in there and the comfortable temperatures, all of those just play a factor in building a great environment for the workforce. And I think when you're pairing a good building with good technology together, you can create a very attractive place for people to come and work, and where they're going to be happier and stay long term.
Yeah, that definitely is another natural overlap I see between our companies, is caring about that S in ESG, the social part. Kimby, is there anything else that you would really call out about how LEED certification impacts worker lives on a daily basis? Yeah,
absolutely. Dex just touched on it. Just this, we added a lot of natural light into our buildings with windows and glazing. And one of the things for LEED certification is that you have to be within 75% of your building has to have a window within sight. And then there's additional classification in terms of you have to be able to see moving objects outside, or is it a window, is it a skylight, different things of that nature. But we forget of how important just like natural light is for humans. If you put yourself in a dark room and you completely lose track of time, how tired you're gonna just feel like instantly. Versus like if you can look through a window and you can say, okay, it's 12 o'clock, or the sun's starting to set, it's 6 o'clock, or it's nighttime, how your body just is able to adapt a lot better to that. So natural light is just a huge thing that just has a huge impact on the workers in one of these warehouses. Then it's things like air quality. We forget about just breathing in just clean, fresh air. And of course, you guys are automation, so it's just really clean sites. But how important like air quality is just to feel good that you're breathing in really clean air. And then I touched on it a little bit too, just air condition. How small that is. We think about it, and it's like you put yourself in in a hot warehouse versus a air-conditioned warehouse, and how comfortable you are and how more efficient you can be. Those are some of the things that really just stand out in terms from a human standpoint. Then if you just go outside of just like, we always look at kind of two things. One, would I want to work there in terms of the location of that warehouse? Is it easy to get to? Do I have amenities around? So if I want to step outside for lunch, can I go grab something relatively quick? Is it, near schools and daycares so I can actually drop my kids off in the morning, pick them up at night? Is it relatively close to where I live so I don't have to commute an hour and a half to get to work? So that's kind of the one aspect. And the other one is, would I want to work inside the building? So again, it touches on the windows, the air quality, the AC, and all of that kind of creatures of habits that we as humans need. So those are kind of the two main points that we really, when picking a site, we focus on those two things, and we put ourselves into not just the tenant shoes, but the employee inside the warehouse. And would I personally want to work there and in there? And that's kind of how we approach projects.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And Dex, what else can warehouse automation provide for workers too? How can it make things better for them?
Yeah, I think one of the big aspects that we always talk about is just the opportunity to focus on, more higher skill or career growth opportunities. So a lot of times in these warehouse environments that we're going into, they might have a lot of turnover. And so they're spending all of their, efforts on just recruitment and replacing people and training people. And it's very expensive. It's very time consuming, and it puts stress on the workers that are, there every day, showing up every day because they're training someone new all the time. So when you put in technology that makes it easier for training, makes it more comfortable, it tends to help you, more easily recruit and retain people. And when you do that, you can then shift your efforts on, upskilling. And with this technology, there's other areas where you can put more critical thought into the workday on where you can find improvements, or maybe it's you want to learn how to maintain the system.
Yeah.
And so you can
software aspects.
or the software aspects. So you can focus a lot on those areas instead. And then when you think about the physical environment, a lot of times with like existing maybe batch picking and scanning and moving around, you might be pushing a cart, grabbing stuff off the shelves. A bunch of times you might have to have a forklift come bring it down, you pick from it, put it back up. It's a lot of like extra non-value added touches, but these people are maybe walking 5-6 miles a day.
Right.
Great for exercise. You want to get your 10,000 steps in each day, but it can be very tiring and physically exhausting. And then if you think about pulling pallet jacks around the warehouse or palletizing manually, it's just a lot of physical strain, a lot of physical effort. So when you look towards automation, especially goods to person systems, you're removing a lot of that physical strain. The workstations are ergonomic and height adjustable, which is also a great benefit. Again, just improving the quality of effort that the employee has to put into things. It's more comfortable. So that's a big aspect to it too. It's just making an environment that is easier to work on. And then I think it's a safety aspect too. A lot of forklifts going around the buildings. You have to pay close attention. And unfortunately, you see news stories every year where somebody unfortunately gets hit by one. It can be dangerous. There's a lot of loud noises in some of these environments, especially in like manufacturing or some of these warehouses that have both manufacturing and warehousing space. There's a lot of moving parts, trucks coming in and out, lots of people. So if you can use something like mobile robotics for that transportation that's has sensors and maybe dedicated fenced off paths or zones, you can create a more safe environment too. And so when people are looking where they want to work, they can go maybe into a hot, steamy warehouse where they're walking 5 or 6 miles a day picking goods, or they can go into a beautiful, clean, new warehouse, comfortable, air-conditioned, with equipment that, makes it less straining on them and allows them growth opportunities. It's a pretty easy choice, and you're going to find better talent, and you're going to create a better work environment. And you're going to get not just people excited to work there, but people that become more passionate about your company and your brand and the good that you're doing.
Yeah, I think that's another point to kind of feed into this idea of being future proof and competitive advantage. Like with labor markets shrinking, you need to be able to hire and retain the best talent.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's keep talking a little bit more about things like on a daily basis. How can you be energy efficient every single day? So Dex, how can automation technologies like our shuttles, mini loads, king drive conveyors lead to more energy efficient operations every day?
One aspect is you can get a lot more throughput out of one building. So if you're using one building instead of multiple sites to handle this, there's already a good energy savings from electricity, heating, cooling, and just the environmental impact in that aspect. Then you start looking at our ASRS, like our shuttles and mini loads. If you think of like a hybrid car or an electric car, that regenerative braking process. So it's recuperating energy as it slows down. So you're better utilizing the energy that way too. And then with our king drive conveyor, that's another one where it's a little bit more low voltage. So it's a little bit more energy efficient than some other ones out there. But the other aspect is it can kind of be zone shut off. So if it's not needing to be used, you're not running it and wasting the electricity in that standpoint, which is good. But then also you're not wearing out the parts more. Yeah. So the more you wear stuff out, the more you have to replace it and the more impact that eventually has on the environment as well. So when you're looking at these technologies, you really need to think of long-term good maintenance and how to keep it clean, how to keep it running so you're using less spare parts, which not only saves you money, but definitely has a nice environmental story with it as well. Yeah.
We also talked about in previous episodes, right-sized packaging and how that can lead to reductions in waste, especially if you're recycling any cut-off box materials. On top of that, how else can waste be reduced in the warehouse?
Yeah. So one of the most common ones I see is, hey, we want to shift away from some of these like plastic or poly bags. They're great because they're very affordable, but a lot of companies are shifting more towards like different types of cardboard packaging for that reason. It's more recyclable. You can use recycled materials for it. So that's one thing we see. Another thing is just the materials you're using within the warehouse. Maybe it's the racking you're installing or the type of automation equipment you're putting in or that sort of thing. It's just looking at, is it maybe a lower carbon emission steel? It could be repurposing certain things, like how are you using your totes or storage shelves? What materials are you using for it?
Or maybe even refurbishing spare parts instead of always buying new ones.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of different aspects that you can do there, and then going back to that original stuff of just the lighting and environmental aspects of the building too.
Yeah, I think another one that really interests me, I hadn't really thought about it until someone explained it to me, but in grocery settings especially, like the faster throughput means food doesn't get wasted on the shelf in the warehouse. Yeah,
that spoilage, that's a big waste of, not only money, and it's very expensive in a narrow margin business. But being able to quickly take in full pallets and split them up into smaller picks or smaller cases with mixed case pallets for the stores keeps things fresh. And that spoilage, not as good for the environment because you need to, produce more, or it drives up costs when there's, limited amounts of it. So reducing spoilage, that's another big one.
Yeah. Camby, is there anything that you've seen tenants do to make their daily operations greener, even if it's just something within their working culture where they're thinking more about how to be green?
Yeah, I would say just the flow of operation. Dex touched it on a little bit, just making sure that something as simple as your racking plan makes sense. So the things that you're using more is quickly and easily accessible, so you don't have to drive the forklift all the way down the warehouse to go grab something multiple times, that your layout really does make sense. I would say that's one of the things. From Rosefellow standpoint, just from an efficient standpoint, the same way that you build your house and you want to make sure it's airtight, it's the same way that you want to build your warehouse, where you don't have, if middle of winter and you open a window and all the cold air is coming in, well, it's the same thing for a warehouse. So to have, your dock doors that are insulated, to have proper insulation walls, all the seals that are airtight. double glazed windows. So in the summer it's cool inside, in the winter it's warm inside, and not to be leaking your air conditioned air outside in the summer or leaking your heat outside in the winter. It's the same thing. So tenants are definitely more aware of that, and it's knowing that, again, if you're in an air-conditioned warehouse, that your dock doors are going to open and close much more versus keeping them wide open and letting that air just get outside, right? And just being a little bit more mindful of that.
Great. So to round out our conversation, I think it'd be interesting to hear your perspectives on a little bit of things like transparency and governance. At least in the U.S., we're starting to see some regulations come up, especially for packaging. Some states are, making laws about how much wasted space can be in a package. And I anticipate we'll see more regulations in the future around these topics. So maybe to kick this off with another possibly hot take question, in your opinions, are regulations encouraging companies to dive deeper into the topic of ESG? Or is it actually limiting the creativity and they are acting a little bit more piecemeal and reactively as these things get legislated?
I'll dive into it. I think there's a fine line between both. I think there has to be, governments have to work with companies and companies have to work with governments. There's certain times that, they can ask for something that just doesn't financially make sense. Underground parking, for example. If the city that you're working in is limited on space and they're trying to put parking underground, well, that's going to increase costs significantly, where then it just doesn't make the project viable. And if you don't make a project viable, then you're maybe just adding additional costs for transportation, because now that company needs to be further out of the city to have their goods, right? So there's a lot of things of that nature. So working closely with cities to make sure that their regulations make sense in today's climate. Understanding that we are here to try to make our projects green, and we're working together to do that, but to sometimes put things that don't necessarily make sense in that area, that just makes building costs just more expensive, which in return is going to increase rents and increase goods across the board.
Right.
So it's really working hand in hand with cities, with companies, with regulators to make sure that it makes sense for all parties involved.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. I think, at least here in the U.S. too, like sometimes the government regulations can kind of help push towards those goals. I think a lot of times, like I kind of mentioned earlier, companies are already going above and beyond the regulations. And I think there's certain elements to the core of your business and what you believe. And if you really believe in sustainability and you're putting the proper people to do the research, the investigations, the efforts behind it, not only are you going to have a easier time implementing those things, but you're likely going to have a higher chance to see the potential savings and longevity that comes out of it.
Yeah.
If you look at the regulations, it's just like, it's another checkbox I have to do, and you're just trying to meet the bare minimum requirements all the time, you're maybe not going to have as much of the impact and potentially the cost savings that can go with it.
Yeah, and you won't be able to zoom out and say like, okay, how could these things all work together? How can I be a little bit more strategic about this instead of reactive?
Yeah, and I think again it goes back to the core of the customer base too, and like, who are your buyers? What do they believe in? And what is your competition landscape? What are they doing in terms of environmental, focuses or sustainability initiatives? And so it's part of your strategic overall plan. It's not just, oh, hey, we have to, do this checkbox because the government said so. It's also about how can it help us reach the customers and have the right messaging and help them understand and be part of our journey with sustainability as well. And I think that goes a lot further and has a lot more impact and benefits to the companies as well.
Yeah. And then what do you guys see as the value of measurements and certifications like LEED or product carbon footprints? Why are those useful to have?
I think having those certifications is necessary to not have greenwashing, because that's another aspect. Like if you can take data a lot of times and make it look one way, and it's not always the full picture of the story. So having something a little bit more standardized with certifications just shows that it's not greenwashing, and it shows that you're putting the conscious efforts into this and doing the research and the right thing in terms of sustainability.
Yeah, and for when it comes to LEED certification, it's a clear, point system where these are the points you get for certain things, and then you can have LEED certified silver, gold, or platinum, and by achieving those points, you're going to achieve that level of certification. So I think it's extremely important. There's no gray zone. It's black or white. Does your building check all these boxes? If so, this is your point system, and this is your certification, right? So extremely important to have.
Yeah. Well, thank you both for this conversation. I think this topic is becoming more top of mind, and I'm seeing it for the reasons that we've already talked about. It's not just a feel-good thing, but it's a more strategic way to approach your business. It's a way to future-proof your business. So hopefully this has sparked some good thoughts for our listeners. Camby, is there anything else that you would add? Anything else you think people should know about Rosefellow, and how should they reach out to you if they have more questions?
Yeah, no, again, just thank you very much for having me today on the podcast. It was an absolute pleasure. Rosefellow, we're real estate developers. We're growing across Canada, and we're looking to grow into the US, either as spec developers or build to suit. So anyone that's looking for their next place, it would be a pleasure to chat with them. We're as flexible as point on a map, and we'll go buy a piece of land there and build something for you with pleasure. You can reach me easily at cambil@rosefellow.com. That's KAMBIL@rosefellow.com. I'm easily accessible on LinkedIn and Instagram, so it would be a pleasure to chat and answer any questions.
Yeah, and you've got some great LinkedIn content. I'll plug that for you. So that's all for this episode. Thanks again for Camby and Dex, and also thank you for listening in. If you're enjoying this podcast, please rate it on your favorite platform. And if you have topics that you want us to cover in the future, please leave a comment. And hopefully you'll join us on the next episode of The Automation Journey.